Hello and welcome back to Paddock and Track, the show where we bring you news on and off the track. I'm Max and I'm joined as always by my co-host Amaan.
What's up, guys?
And today we have some really exciting racing news for you. We'll get into the Australian Grand Prix in F1, but to start off, let's hop real quick into the Sebring 12 Hours. Now, I don't think either of us watched very much of this race, to be honest with you guys.
Yes.
However, we did see one very important part, which was Pipo Derani's crash in the number 31 Cadillac.
Yes.
It was a big crash. Really, it's good. I'm happy he's okay. That was a big crash for him. So, if you have not seen, I will go look up a video of this because it was a pretty crazy crash. So, basically, the Pipo Derani in the number 31 Cadillac Wheelin racing car, the hypercar, of course, hits Miguel Molina, the front left tire, I believe, of Miguel Molina. So, Miguel Molina was in a GT car, a Ferrari, and so Pipo Derani's passing him as the faster car, and then clips the front left tire of Molina. Then they both end up essentially going straight off, but Molina gets slightly more traction that he can turn a little bit and get out of the way.
Yes.
But Pipo Derani just goes straight off, goes right into the barrier, and then flips up, and then somehow he lands up upside down on top of the tire barrier. So a very scary accident for him. Especially, too, it sucks because he was in the lead of the race, and the Cadillacs had been very dominant here so far.
Yes, they have.
So, eventually we see the number 7 Porsche, of course, getting past, even though Derani had a fairly significant lead. Again, of course, after a crash, right, it's not like he's going to go anywhere. So, the number 7 Porsche gets past him, and then the number 7 Porsche is pretty dominant for the rest of the race.
Yes.
We did see, I noticed at least, Rexy, the GTD Pro car, it was doing pretty well, actually, leading during about 5 hours left of the race of a 12-hour race at Sebring. However, it just ended up, he was not, I think after a pit stop they fell back.
Yeah.
So, sad to see for them as a fan favorite and a favorite of mine, too, of course.
Yes.
But yeah, so a fairly interesting race. But sometimes with these long races, it's a little hard to keep watching them.
Yeah.
That's why some of the shorter races, like Road America, are kind of nice to watch. It only like about 2.5 hours, I think.
Yes.
So that's nice. But now let's get on to
the
main event of this week, which is the Australian Grand Prix.
So, we quite an interesting race because we haven't seen. There's a bunch of a shift at the top of the grid, as we see, and also the bottom as well, as we see a lot of retirements, but also like a notable retirement, Max Verstappen.
Yes.
What do you think about that one?
Well, honestly, it's the big story of the weekend, right behind Logan Sargent, which we'll get to in a second here.
Yes.
But yeah, it really, it's uncharacteristic for Max Verstappen. We'd seen, of course, it wasn't entirely his fault, really. He said the brakes were essentially stuck. On the right rear, and that kind of caused it. So he said it was almost like driving with a handbrake on. So the brakes wouldn't fully open. So he was sliding a bit. I think he probably wasn't getting the same top speed as he's used to.
Yes.
So obviously that's a big issue.
And also,
for him.
as we saw, that his brake eventually did it looked like it exploded as he was entering the pit lane. So as like that entire back right, I think it was the back right tire that did entire tire was melted, the entire brake, it was just completely destroyed.
There was no coming back from it anymore.
Yes. But
during that run, it was 43 races Max ran without any retirements, starting in Australia 2022 until this race.
Yes.
So he had a total of 43 races, and during that time, 35 of those 43 races he won, and 39 of those races he was on the podium.
Yes, he has amassed 989 points in that span, 15 fastest laps, and he's averaged at like a place and a half just in that entire span. Just unbelievable. And he's, of course, won 2 championships over that period of time.
It's amazing. As we've seen, probably pretty much what I would call a generational talent at this point for Max Verstappen. And a very exciting driver to watch, a very dominant driver. But a shame to see him go out this early in the race, especially because, it was only like lap 3?
It was lap 3, yeah.
Yeah, so a shame to see him go out so early on something that wasn't his fault at all.
Yes. All right. So let's get back into the nitty-gritty of the race. So
before we get to the race, let's talk about what happened before the race.
Before the race?
So if you have not seen, in I believe it was free practice 1. Alex Albon crashed in a very bad manner for the car, in which it didn't really look like that bad of a crash, but it was enough that the chassis itself was broken enough. They said on the commentating that they could stick their finger through it. So that's generally concerning when you have a race car.
Yes, and Williams did not have time to get a new one.
Yeah, so a lot of teams, especially Williams, being a smaller team that has less funding, less resources, it's harder for them to build a spare chassis. So they, unlike maybe some teams like Red Bull that might, or Ferrari that might have a spare chassis just laying around that they can use, Williams does not have that resource available to them.
Yes.
So Alex Albon, in dramatic fashion, well, not to Albon's fault, but the team really decided it was, Williams said that Alex Albon would race Logan Sargent's car.
Wow. I mean, if you look at it in hindsight, that is a good strategy option for Williams, but not a great, moral option.
Yeah, and really, it didn't work out for them.
No, not at all.
We'll go into the results more later, but Albon finished 11th after some penalties that happened after the race and things. But, so, there was no point in putting Albon in the car. He didn't score points anyway. So it kind of is just it's a morale, it's a morale hit for everyone at the Williams team, especially Logan.
Yes.
And then it's like, why would you bother at this point, now that Albon, we saw he didn't really do that great?
I don't know. I mean, we just have to see that, we know that Albon has Australia isn't his track.
Yeah,
really much so.
Yeah, he's crashed last year as well. So,
but we also have to see, because we have to see Logan's progress throughout the season if they're going to keep him, and it's not right to let Albon race.
Yeah.
Even though he crashed, and you're basically punishing another guy for what your mistake was.
Yeah, and it seems to me like you're saying with next season, it seems to me like this is a sign that they're not going to keep him.
They're not going to keep him. I don't think they have much faith at all.
Yeah, why would you bother? If you're not going to keep this man around, if you don't think he's the best driver, why would you keep him for the next season, right? If you're not even going to let him drive this one race, why would you keep him for an entire season?
Exactly. I don't understand, but this is a clear telltale sign that Logan will be gone at the end of the season, but also his confidence definitely took a hit, and that's not really good for the rest of his career.
Well, and the problem is where does he go next year? I mean, I don't think if he goes anywhere, it will be like a Williams reserve driver.
Yeah.
Because honestly, even the lower teams like Sauber, if Williams is somewhat, I mean, Williams is probably better than Sauber at this point.
Yes.
But they're not that far away. So it's like, if he's not good on Williams, he's not going to be good on Sauber.
Yeah.
So I think if he goes anywhere, either he'll be like the next Nicholas Latifi and basically disappear off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Or he'll become like a reserve driver and they'll never end up using him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, his future is not that clear right now. I mean, we will definitely see a bunch of driver switches in the coming year.
I think so.
And we'll see where that stands for Logan.
Yeah. But to get back into the race, so obviously right away, Perez had a 3-second penalty for the start of the race, moving him back to, I believe it was 6th place?
6th place, yes.
So, not great for him. Obviously, he has had his fair share of problems in qualifying.
Yes.
And so, obviously, a great penalty is not his fault. It's changing parts on the car. But still, it's not great for him.
Yes.
So then Hamilton, after FP2, to sort of go back, I guess, a little bit, before we get right into the race, Hamilton had said that he felt the least confident that he's ever felt in this car after practice 2, which was clearly reflected in his qualifying.
As he was out in Q2.
Yes. Finishing 11th in qualifying.
Yes.
And starting, of course, then the race in 11th. Not good for Hamilton. Not good for Ferrari next season.
Yes.
But I think if I'm Ferrari now, I'm looking at the fact that even if before we get to the results of the race, Sainz qualified 2nd.
Yes. And
now Hamilton is 11th. That's not a good start for him.
I mean, yes, some of it could be blamed on the car. I'll give him that. But I don't think he trusts the car. I don't know if he's fallen off or is it the car. That's the thing.
I think it's hard to say. It's probably a bit of both, in my opinion. For Hamilton, he's a good driver. He's shown that many times that he's a good driver. But I think he has kind of stopped caring as much as he used to because he knows he doesn't have a shot at the podium or at wins. So I think he's like, well, what does it matter if I race hard or not? Who cares?
Yeah.
But it's not. I don't think that's a good way to be because then you have a negative mindset. The cars, you're not gonna be any better.
Yes, of course.
So yeah, but
I mean, maybe it's that preferential treatment now of George Russell, or I don't
guess, but really Russell isn't doing that much better. I mean, Russell qualified 7th.
Yeah.
So not the best for either of them. There could be some preferential treatment. I could definitely see that. But still, like when you're leaving to go to a new team and you're not doing good in this season, as Ferrari, I would be concerned.
Yes, but so I have a question here. How does the contract work? Is he locked in for 2025? Could they like pull out? Or
I don't believe so.
Do we not know the details of the contract?
I'm sure somebody does. I don't for sure. They probably can't pull out at this point because then. Either way, it looks bad for Ferrari if they do. I doubt they can. Usually these things, they're kind of locked in at this point. And especially now you're into the season, you're probably not going to make a change.
Yes.
So I don't think they can pull out because they've probably already committed some money too. So they're kind of locked in.
But also I'd like to see that Ferrari is doing really strong this season, but I definitely don't think it's going to be replicated next season.
We'll see. I mean, but they are probably the team with probably the most resources and probably one of the highest budgets. So I mean, I don't know for sure. You'd like to see them do well, of course. I think we all would for Ferrari. Ever since they started kind of struggling, it's kind of sad to watch. Not even as a Ferrari fan, it's sad to watch.
Yeah, it is.
So hopefully we'll see them improve and continue this kind of advancement for next year.
Yes.
Well, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So then to get in, I wanted to mention one thing. So last season, at the beginning of the season, McLaren had these sort of. They're not really screens, but they're sort of screens. Essentially, they were to rotate ads, basically.
Okay.
So they're like on either side of the cockpit. So right where the driver sits, they're right there by the mirrors, sort of. And I noticed those on the car. They had gotten rid of them part of the way through last season.
Yes.
And now they seem to have brought them back. So I'm interested to see if that will affect them, if they'll end up taking them off again. Because clearly it must have done something to help them last season. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have taken them off.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why they brought them back and if they'll keep them.
I mean, it's like, what did those screens do again? Like,
it was really just to rotate ads.
Just rotate ads.
They could like change to something.
It probably was just a design thing at that point. But I'm saying they probably tested it last year to see if like it reduced anything.
I wonder if there's just a weight. I wonder if it's just a weight thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that being a problem because now you've got all this. I mean, I'm sure there's not that much.
I mean, there's like parts in the screen, but
yeah. So you probably gotta have something that controls it. So that probably adds some weight.
Some weight to it, yeah.
But we'll see if they end up changing there.
Yes.
Now to actually get into the race this time. So right at the start, the biggest thing I noticed was, though it was mostly pretty clean, Albon lost 2 places at the start.
Yeah.
So he started in P12, and immediately right at the start, he dropped down to 14th. So again, a really bad look for Albon, who has just taken over Logan's car. Would Logan have done better? I don't know.
I don't think.
I'm not sure. It's hard to say, right? But at the same time, Albon's not doing much better than him. So, concerning for him again. And also to make a mention, Zhou Guanyu did start in the pit lane.
Yes, he did.
Which makes things difficult for him going into the race, especially on the start. It's just hard to make it.
Not the only problems for Sauber.
Yeah.
We'll get into this later.
Yeah. So, Sainz passed Verstappen early on lap 2. So, as we talked about, he said he was having brake issues. They hadn't fully diagnosed what had happened.
Yeah, I think it was radio. He said he lost the car.
Yeah.
More on that.
Going into, I think they said it was turn 3 was, I believe, what Sainz was saying. It might have been later, but Verstappen lost the car a little bit on the back end, which of course takes some time to correct. Then now you slow down a bit, and then that helped Sainz to get past him. Yeah.
Yes.
So then. Yeah, and then Verstappen had said, I just lost the car, really weird. And they said maybe he was like sliding on the straight, which didn't make sense to me from the commentating That's what they had said, but I was
like, it was like the back that was like sliding.
Yeah,
the back was loose or something like that. That's what they were saying.
So early problems for Verstappen, and then we see a lot of smoking coming from the back of his car. Now it was hard to tell at first if it was an engine problem or something from his tire.
Yes.
Because it looked kind of at first right away it looked like it was coming straight out the back. In the middle of the back of his car.
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, that's an engine problem.
But they would notice that more smoke was coming out of the back right tire.
Yeah.
Which seemed to be more of a brake issue, which they later confirmed it was.
Yeah. And then, as you said, when he pulled into the pits, you saw a small, almost like a little explosion.
Yes.
And then when he was pulling into the pit box, the brakes were on fire.
Yes.
Which is not uncommon to see because those brakes are really, really hot.
Yeah.
And so that's why they always put those fans on them right away.
Yes.
But still, they were more on fire, and only the one brake was on fire, so that's definitely a concerning thing.
Definitely.
And then Max just hopped right out of the car. It's sad to see him because although I think many of us would like to see him lose, because dominance is never exciting. I think it is still sad to see someone who, for no fault of his own, has
had to
retired.
Yeah.
But
this is the first also running later. We see that first we need to think about that. I think it was like Hamilton. Like a few drivers started on the soft compounds, which was an interesting strategy because we saw that it didn't work out at all. Like I think it was like lap 4 or 5, like they started pitting.
Very early on, those soft tire runners were pitting, and a lot of the drivers started on mediums, a couple on hards, and then very few on softs. About the same probably on softs and hards.
Yes.
It clearly, like you said, it did not work out for them at all.
No. And the medium tires as well. I mean, what did you say the issue was with the medium tires?
Well, the medium tires, all of these tires had a big problem with graining. So if you don't know, graining is essentially when the car slides around during turns and things like that, right? The tires lose a bit of the rubber that's on them. But then that rubber collects on the outside of the tires. So it now is almost like you're driving on like a bunch of lumps on the tire. So it doesn't grip as well to the track.
Yeah.
And so that's what the drivers are experiencing. That's what they say when they're saying they're having graining. That's why it's a big problem, and then you got to come in and pit just to get that traction back.
Yes. Yeah.
So, as we said, though, those medium and soft tires did not run for very long. Everybody pitted fairly early except for those hard tire runners. But I think it was a weird strategy call looking back on it.
Well, we also did see not all the medium tires pitted because we saw Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris.
And Pierre Gasly.
All three of them had the medium compound. And we saw Sainz and Norris leading the race.
Yeah.
And then we had Gasly in 6th place for a while in the race. So not everyone did have problems with those medium tires, but we generally saw most of these drivers going onto that hard compound.
Yeah. And then we did see Hamilton again complaining that other cars are fast. Yes. Which he has done before. So
which he's done in every single race, I think.
Yeah. So on lap 16, he went on the radio saying, "Geez, that car's fast," in reference to Perez. So of course the Red Bull is pretty fast. As we know.
Yes.
But still, he just keeps on complaining that everyone else is fast, and it's like Russell is able to outperform him. So what's going on there?
To also say that Russell also did say that Perez is also fast.
Yes.
He did. He also said that car is a rocket ship, to quote him. This was later on in the race, so both Mercedes drivers reflecting on Perez and the Red Bull cars.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting to see that Hamilton has complained more than Russell has.
Yeah.
Which is sort of looks bad for Hamilton, right? Again, if he's complaining more about issues than Russell is, I think we talked about this before, but that doesn't look good for Hamilton as a 7-time world champion compared to Russell, who has won like a singular race.
Yes.
So it's not great for him. And then we move on to a virtual safety car on lap 17 due to Hamilton's engine failure. So if you watch the race, Hamilton's going down the straight and his engine just cuts it off.
Yeah, he was just going at full speed and then just all of a sudden just stops.
Yeah. So he was able to get it mostly out of the way, but still for the safety of the marshals, they called a virtual safety car.
Yes.
But it really did not affect anyone. At the end of the race, Carlos Sainz was saying about he was always thinking in the back of his head about a red flag or a safety car, but the virtual safety car at least did not impact him too much.
Yes.
And if you don't know, a virtual safety car is essentially it helps the marshals to stay safe while they're trying to clear an incident, but they don't need everybody slowed down and bunched up. So they don't need everyone to be as slowed down. So a virtual safety car, basically, it creates a maximum lap time that the drivers have to do They can obviously go slower than that. That's fine. But there's a maximum. So if they're over that, then they get penalized, I believe.
Okay.
And then so that just helps the marshals. Everyone slow down a bit. Then they can work a little easier, and it's a little safer for them.
Yes.
So then we get to Ferrari. I thought this was interesting. Ferrari told both their drivers on lap 19 to hold position. So basically, they just want neither of them to attack each other.
Yes.
It's probably mostly a tire saving concern. But I do think it's interesting whenever a team gives orders to hold position or swap drivers, just to see the tactics and then see what that does to the driver's mindset. Because I think it can really affect them mentally.
Well, also, I think it'd be smart for them to hold position because I don't want Leclerc passing Carlos Sainz as we don't know that Carlos Sainz is racing for himself this season.
Yeah.
So I don't think he would listen to team orders. That's not a great look for Ferrari. So I think they were just weighing their options of what they could do.
Definitely.
And also they had the concern of the McLarens also behind them as well. But not really that much, but I think it's more of the Carlos Sainz
I think,
thing.
and then also, again, just the tires.
Yes,
right?
tires.
As we said, there's a lot of graining going on, and Carlos Sainz at that point was still on his medium tires. Yeah, so just being on those medium tires, I believe Leclerc was on the hards at that point.
He was, yes.
But still, just to keep those tires under control and not wear them out too fast is really important. And then, so holding position, that just gets rid of any concern of attack from behind.
Yes, I mean, mostly for the most part of the race, Ferrari had controlled their own pace because they didn't really have much concern from the from the cars behind them. So
they had small a little concern in the back of their head about McLaren towards the end, but really nothing crazy for Ferrari. It was a good race for them, very solid for them.
Yes.
And then we get to lap 29, another team order. Piastri and Norris told to swap positions. Yes. So Piastri was ahead of Norris. Piastri was in third, Norris in fourth. Norris, he's an older driver. He's more mature at this point. Although Piastri is a very mature driver. He just doesn't have as much experience, right? And they're both running fine, but I think the McLaren realized that Norris had more pace. He had the better chance of attacking.
He also did have the fresher tires. I think it was by 5 laps. He had a fresher hard something like that. So I think they thought he had a better chance of catching Leclerc for second place.
Yeah.
So I think that was definitely an issue. Not an issue. A strategy thing, but Piastri is also.
Well, I think that's the hard part of being a team principal is making those hard calls.
Yes.
And strategism too should play a part in that. But that's the hard part is making those calls because it's hard to say especially in this scenario for Oscar Piastri on his home race.
Yeah.
And you're telling him you got to swap positions. But good for Oscar Piastri. He didn't complain.
Yes.
He didn't make a fuss out of it. He just did it, and that's good for him.
He did, and he did still end up P4. So
yeah. So I think Piastri is a driver that we want to see more of.
Yes.
As more people like him, because really he's very calm when he races.
He definitely is,
and he doesn't complain. He might complain about tires, whatever, but he doesn't complain about other people or again, even in this case, they're forcing him to swap positions with his teammate at his home race, and he didn't complain. Good for him.
That's also really good for McLaren as their team as unified as ever.
Yeah.
To get to stay as a great team going on in the season.
Definitely. So we see Leclerc complains about his tires as we expect on those hard tires though.
Yes.
Because he did pit fairly early, though those hard tires have looked pretty good throughout the race.
Yeah.
But he had to pit pretty fast. So a little bit of concern there for the teams just seeing those tires go that fast. I think that's something that you gotta think about. Well, I'm just saying
the entire Grand Prix has been a tire issue for all these teams.
Pretty much.
So, it's just not much of a surprise that Leclerc is complaining about those tires.
Yeah.
And just continue on.
So here's the interesting thing. Sauber has had so many problems with their pit crew.
Yeah.
They had a very slow stop for Bottas previously, and then now in this race, slow stops for both Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. Big problem for them.
An interesting stat here. Bottas owns the slowest and the second slowest pit stops of all time this year. That's ridiculous.
To be fair, they were on two different teams. One with Mercedes and one with Sauber. However, the fact that Sauber is this slow is very problematic. And the fact that it's consistently slow.
Yeah.
You have one slow pit stop, okay, forgivable. But the fact that Sauber has had so many slow pit stops is very, very
And not just one driver, both drivers. It's just the entire team.
They said, I think I heard that it might be a problem with cross-threading on their wheel bolts. But still, they need to figure this out.
Yeah, it's not a great look for them. They were like middle of the pack drives until their pit stops happen. Then they just fall to last. Yeah, and that just ruins their entire race.
Zhou Guanyu had ran a pretty decent race considering he started from the pit lane.
Yes.
But then after these slow pit stops, it just killed their momentum.
Yeah.
And that's something big that I think a lot of drivers can struggle with because it's not their fault is the problem. Mm-hmm. And then drivers come into the pits, they pit, and they're expecting pretty fast, right? Yeah. We see like 2.5-second pit stops are the normal.
Yes.
And then when you have a 20-second pit stop, even a 10-second pit stop, that's an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, entirely.
So what I thought was interesting too is Russell on lap 43 said that the tires were feeling pretty good, and he was on 34-lap-old hards.
And that's really considerable because of the tire issues all the rest of the drivers are having.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's a driver thing that the tires are still feeling pretty good, or if it's a car, right? So we didn't get a ton of information from Hamilton about his tires, but Russell saying that his tires were good on 34-lap-old tires is a very good thing. So that's an interesting thing for Mercedes to look at is that George Russell doing something, or is that the car being helpful for him?
And that's definitely good for later strategy options as well.
Yeah, because we can see that Mercedes does not, they have a lot of problems.
Yeah, they really do.
And then Bottas had a pit lane infringement on lap 45. I don't really know what that means, to be honest with you.
I don't know what happened. They didn't really go into more detail.
Yeah, so they showed a graphic that race control had noted a pit stop lane infringement. I seriously don't know what that means.
I don't think they did they like go through with the penalty?
No, they never. It never went to the stewards.
Okay.
So there's race control and there's the stewards, right? So race control is actively looking at every part of the race, but then they will submit things to review to the stewards, and then the stewards will hand out penalties and things like that. But race control is the one who will note them, and then they go to the stewards. So it never said that it went to the stewards, which is also strange. It never said, like, no further review or no review needed. So I don't really know, but it's a very strange thing that came up on the screen. So
I don't know what happened, but it just adds to the disaster of that Sauber pit stop.
And then Gasly received a 5-second penalty late into the race for crossing the line on the pit exit.
That's just sloppy. That's just sloppy at this point.
That's entirely Gasly's fault.
Yeah.
If you look really quick, just to make a note, if you look at the track from above, you'll see coming out of the pit lane, there's sort of almost like if you're driving on the regular road, there's lanes, right? So there's a lane for the pit lane on the front straight, right? And so that you have to stay in that lane. If you're coming out of the pits, you have to stay there till you come
merge into the track, just like on the highway when you have to merge onto the highway.
Exactly, right? So you can't cross over because that's dangerous, right? You're going slower than the cars coming by on that straight, so you have to be careful there. So Pierre Gasly came over that line right at the end of it, but still, you're right. It's just messy from him.
Yes.
Like, Pierre is a driver who's been driving for a very long time. He shouldn't be making these mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
well, that was the race. We see Ferrari 1-2 since Bahrain 2022.
Yeah, so that's kind of a sad stat for a team with this much history. Yeah, the first 1-2 since Bahrain of 2022, which was also a Max Verstappen DNF. So an interesting stat there from Ferrari.
Yes, definitely. I mean, seems like Ferrari's just taking advantage of Max Verstappen.
I guess so, but hey, whatever gets them the wins, right?
Yeah.
So we see, we won't go through the whole final order, but Sainz and Leclerc again, as we said, finishing 1-2.
Leclerc with the fastest lap, yes.
Great for them, another world championship point. Other notable drivers that came high up, Yuki Tsunoda coming in P7. So there was a late penalty for Fernando Alonso after the race that bumped him down to 8th place. Which brought Yuki Tsunoda up one position, giving him some much needed points.
I mean, we forgot to mention Alonso's penalty was for a George Russell crash that happened in the last lap.
Yes, so a scary incident there for George Russell.
Definitely. I mean, the way he crashed too. He crashed into the wall and then was splayed over the track, entirely across.
On his side too. Yeah. So the tires are like sort of held on by these like ropes essentially, and so they did their job and held the tires onto the car, but they also kind of went under the car, which flipped him up onto his side. But he came out okay, so that's definitely good for him. But I thought it was funny. He was chasing an Aston Martin and then was in the Aston Martin
safety car.
So that was kind of funny to see.
But not just that, the way, just the mentality of those drivers, because he's in that car for a bit, and you don't know who's coming around that corner to run right into you.
You're right. He was in the middle of the track, sideways in the middle of the track. So
yes.
There were drivers still coming by. I mean, they put on a virtual safety car, but it was the last lap, so they're not going to red flag the race. So it was scary for George Russell.
Yes.
I'm glad he's okay. Yes. But again, so that elevated Yuki Tsunoda up to 7th place. Great for him. A great result for him, getting some points for RB, which was very needed.
Very, very needed.
And then otherwise, Gasly coming up in 13th is not terrible.
I mean, definitely with that tractor of an Alpine, that was really good.
Yes. So, and then 3 DNFs at this race from Russell, Hamilton, and Verstappen. And then, of course, Logan Sargent did not start, so only a 19-driver race.
Yes.
Ended up being a only 16-driver race.
Wow.
So very weird, actually. It sounds strange, but
4 drivers did not cross the finish line. That's yeah.
So I think it was an exciting race to watch, though, for the most part.
Definitely, I definitely think so. I mean,
some of it was a little boring. In the middle there, it got a little slow.
Yes. So real quick, I really want to address the rumor about Daniel Ricciardo and his future in RB. I mean, we want to touch up on that.
Yeah, so it is just a rumor, but supposedly Daniel Ricciardo has been given an ultimatum for, when is it till, I think, Baku?
No, I think it was Japan.
Okay, well, really, that's
soon.
That
is soon.
So basically, they could replace him with probably it would be Lawson.
Lawson, yes.
Ricciardo is not driving his car in FP1 of Japan.
I think
they're replacing him with
I forgot his name.
Iwasawa. I can check for you.
We can check it. Yeah.
But yeah, they're replacing him with their F2 driver in the Red Bull Academy.
Yes.
Because of course the teams have to give an F2 driver at least one free practice session.
Yeah.
So, that's interesting to see for him. What do you think about
this? But, I mean, I think it's just a rumor. I don't think they're going to give it that much, but also given his history about how he's supposedly a veteran driver that's supposed to, like, get his act together quickly and, like, be that veteran presence on this team. But I could totally believe this happening, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I could see it happening. So just to touch, the F2 driver they're letting in is Ayumu Iwasa. I'm sure I butchered that.
Yes.
However, that is the driver. That is the one who will be replacing him for FP1 in Japan. I agree. I could see an ultimatum in his future because the problem is that like you said, he's supposed to be this senior driver who's bringing experience to the team, and he's not. I mean, he's bringing something to the team, which is like he knows this stuff, and he is a race winner.
Yes.
But usually Yuki is outperforming him.
And it's not just a little bit, by a lot. Too. Yeah, Yuki's like really outperforming
and consistently.
Him. Yes.
So I think RB or VCAR, whatever, have realized that this is kind of something they need to address. And honestly, I think this is what they should have done from the start. With just
definitely.
Take Lawson. But yeah, I think they have finally realized, they finally come around to the fact that Ricciardo is not the person they need in the car.
Yes, and I think that this is going to be great for them because Lawson, I think, is going to be a great driver for them. As we saw last year, he did score points in that AlphaTauri car.
Yeah.
And while Ricciardo was recovering, so
yeah, I definitely think it could be a good move for them to put Lawson in there.
Mm-hmm.
Even I don't know if this is really something they could do, but put Lawson in the car for one race. See what he can do. If that's actually something they're allowed to do, like
yes.
within the rules. Put him in the race for one race.
Mm-hmm.
One race. Give him like a specific position he needs to hit. Like, I don't know, 12th place or something like that. He needs to get 12th place or higher. Then they'll give him a seat. Mm-hmm. I think that's what they should do. If they can. Because it gives Lawson a chance to prove himself, which I think he's definitely looking for. And it gives people a chance to see, oh, okay, Ricciardo's not as good as Yuki or Lawson.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make some changes. Right?
Yes, definitely.
The other thing I want to touch on really quick is that when you watch this race, the cameras don't do justice to how fast these cars are.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they're going really slow.
Yeah, I've noticed it the most at this race, and especially when you're going through that really quick couple of turns there in the middle. I believe you're looking at turns 9 and 10. Mm-hmm. Those turns are really, really quick, and it is so cool to see when you see like an onboard. It's so fast, and if you watch a perspective from like a fan, they're so quick through there. But on the cameras on TV, it doesn't. No,
it really doesn't. I mean, that also adds to the experience of in person to see how skilled these drivers really are, and that's just a testament to how great they are.
Yeah,
and these are the 20 greatest drivers in the world.
Well, 19 greatest drivers in the world.
19, yes.
All right, well, I think that about wraps it up for us on this episode. What do you think, Amaan?
Yeah, I think that does wrap it up. I mean, a fun race to watch.
Yeah.
And yeah, hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today on Paddock and Track. We'll see you for the next one.
Goodbye.